Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Location. With the release of the second FNAF movie, I really was thinking about Michael Afton again, and honestly, just how much we don't know about him. Like, I get that Michael in the movies is probably not Michael Afton, they could be two different characters, even if they are the same character, it's two different continuities. But comparing the characters is like night and day. Michael's motives in the movie are very clear. We get to see him a lot. We get to experience what he experiences alongside with him. And that's just so not true for the games. So, in the spirit of the next movie coming out, I would like to take one last look at Michael Afton's character in the games, see if we can uncover anything that has previously not been discovered, and just overall talk about the character.
Father, it's me, Michael.
Let's start with a simple question. Who is Michael Afton? To answer the question, we have to first look at Sister Location, a game that released way back in 2016, which was a very controversial time to be a theorist. The fan base was still heavily divided thanks to FNAF 4, a game that had way more questions than it did answers, and Scott had hoped to address some of these debates with Sister Location. But shortly after release, the game ended up opening a whole new debate that divided theorists once again. Who were we playing as? There were only two real candidates, William Afton or Michael Afton. At that time, there was a good amount of evidence for both. People who believed we played as William pointed out how we played as a technician that worked on the animatronics, something that we know William did before, and the fact that at the end of the game, after you get scooped, your character has purple eyes. We know William is associated with the color purple. But people who believe that we played as Michael Afton pointed out how Mike is clearly written on hand unit, a clear nod to Mike Schmidt from the very first FNAF game. The debate on Michael versus William raged on for a while, and at the time even the game theorists speculated that we played as William. But with the release of Sister Location's Custom Night DLC, Scott finally put a rest to the debate. In the DLC, we get to see several cutscenes of a man gradually becoming more and more purple over a period of time. So that ended the debate. The man turned purple, so we have to be playing as William. Obviously, there wouldn't be two purple guys, right? So to literally everyone's surprise, the final cutscene revealed that this person who was walking down the street was actually a second purple guy, and we finally got formally introduced to the character of Michael Afton. This revelation immediately shifted our collective focus as theorists. After 4 games of barely knowing anything about the characters that we were playing as, we finally had a name and a voice to place onto our protagonist. Our job now was to narrow it down further and uncover as much information about Michael as possible. Of course, Michael Afton isn't the only Mike that we've been introduced to in the story. As I mentioned earlier, Mike Schmidt is the protagonist of the very first FNAF game, and our first assignment was to figure out if Michael Afton and Mike Schmidt are the same person. It could be a red herring. After all, this is a story with 2 different bites, 2 different golden suits, 2 different instances of places burning down. It's not that ridiculous to assume that there could be 2 different Michaels. There are a lot of people who point to Mike Schmidt's pink slip as proof that Schmidt is actually Afton, bringing up being fired for odor as proof that he is a walking zombie who would probably smell bad, since in Sister Location, he was a zombie. I personally think that the odor thing is just a joke, but even if it isn't a joke, there is much more compelling evidence that the 2 Mikes are the same person. The first piece of evidence I had mentioned earlier, Mike's name is written on hand unit almost exactly like how it's written on his paycheck. It's honestly almost comical how obvious this is. Like Scott couldn't think of another way to hint that Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt. But if you want to say that this is too obvious, there's also the fact that Michael Afton in Sister Location is hired as a technician who clearly knows what he's doing when it comes to handling animatronics. Mike Schmidt also possesses this exact same skill, tampering with the animatronics in Custom Night, leading to him getting fired in the first place. Both Mikes have also been depicted with blue eyes. But Scott didn't make Sister Location to give us answers about FNAF 1, it was FNAF 4 that had the community divided, and Scott intended on clearing things up about that game. So the next question was, how does the existence of Michael Afton impact the story of FNAF 4? Since we know Mike is William's son, that gave us three options. Mike is the kid wearing the Foxy mask, Mike is the victim of the Bite of 83, or Mike is some third son who we'd never seen before. I'm 90% sure, if not 99% sure, that most people who know about FNAF's story will tell you that Mike is the one wearing the Foxy mask, and I agree. But understanding how we come to this conclusion is vital for understanding the character as a whole. And there are also always going to be people who disagree, so we need to prove to them why we think what we think. So how do we know that Michael Afton is the older brother? Security Breach actually gives us some pretty hard confirmation that there are only two Afton brothers thanks to the staff bots, so we can safely rule out the possibility of him being some third unseen brother. But for a while, there is a popular theory called Mike Victim, where people believe that the crying child after the bite got resurrected somehow and actually is Michael Afton. Like most theories about the crying child, this theory is pretty hard to outright disprove due to the mysterious nature of FNAF 4's story. To be honest, chances are if you still believe in Mike Victim, like today, I'm probably not going to be able to convince you otherwise, but I'll still try. I have two main reasons why I believe the crying child cannot be Michael Afton. The first is the eye color. I mentioned this before, but Michael having blue eyes seems to be a consistent character trait. His eyes are blue in both FNAF 1 and Sister Location. In FNAF 4, the crying child has blacked out, creepy looking eyes. This in itself is a very strange detail that probably also needs a theory, but I consider it important because eye color does seem to be a consistent thing in FNAF. The most notable example is Baby's eyes becoming green after being possessed by Elizabeth. So the fact that the crying child's eyes are not blue, but both times we see Michael's eyes, they are blue, tells me that they are not the same person. I'm not saying that the crying child's eyes are literally just black voids, but what I'm saying is whenever Scott wants to show us Michael, he shows us a person with blue eyes. So I think that if Michael was the crying child, Scott would have showed us the crying child with blue eyes at least once. My second piece of evidence is the characterization of the crying child versus the characterization of Michael. The crying child is absolutely terrified of going near the animatronics. Why he was so scared is still a debate, but it is made very clear that he does not want to be anywhere near the animatronics. But Michael, that man works at Freddy's 7 days a week, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. for $120 right there in the paint, dealing with the animatronics. And he's very willing to do it. He's not scared. This is the complete opposite of the crying child, who would break down into tears from being near an animatronic. Now, you could make the argument that he grew out of his fear when he got older, and that would make sense. But this point, combined with the fact that his eyes aren't blue, convinced me that it is impossible for Michael Afton to be the crying child. The staff bots in Security Breach also heavily imply that Michael Afton and the crying child are two different people. Now that we understand that Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt from FNAF 1 and the older brother from FNAF 4, we can finally start to understand what Scott was trying to accomplish with FNAF 4. One of the biggest questions of FNAF is always what kind of idiot would spend his nights risking his life against killer animatronics for minimum wage. Given the style of humor that persists within the series, a good amount of people, me included, always assume that this was part of a joke. The joke is the protagonist should be getting paid a lot more considering what he's dealing with. It's something that most people just brushed off and assumed wasn't actually a relevant question. The existence of Michael Afton changes that entirely. Now we know why our protagonist chooses to spend his nights at Freddy's. Michael being the Foxy Mask kid that accidentally killed his younger brother seems to be the inciting incident behind him constantly working at Freddy's locations. Ironically enough, Michael in the movie also does the exact same thing. The death of his younger brother causes him to eventually end up at Freddy's. And one of the most interesting things about that movie is movie Michael attempts to use his dreams to figure out more about what happened to his younger brother Garrett. This circles us back to FNAF 4, which is a game that features a person having dreams. We know that the movies and the games are two different continuities, but the fact that movie Michael has dreams about Garrett in the FNAF 1 location has always stuck out to me. The FNAF 4 gameplay mirrors FNAF 1's gameplay. You can hear Phone Guy's voice in the background and the ambience. It's a recording from FNAF 1, a recording that only Michael could have heard in the FNAF 1 location. Is it possible that FNAF 4 is Michael having dreams in the FNAF 1 location, just like Michael does in the movie? I'm not sure, but it's something I consider from time to time. Whether he's having these dreams in the FNAF 1 location or not, I think it's safe to say that these are Michael's dreams, especially after the movie. In the movie, Michael chooses to have these dreams to be close to his brother again, and attempt to find out what really happened to him. But in the games, there is no mystery. Michael is the one responsible for his brother's death, and so the FNAF 4 dreams have a completely different meaning. And with the knowledge that these dreams belong to Michael, we can finally start to speculate about what Michael's motivations are, and what Scott meant by the final chapter way back in 2015. One of the bigger questions about Michael that people don't really ask too often is he a good guy or a bad guy? Somewhere in between, maybe? Neither. He seems to be a good guy. Since he shows regret for killing his brother, he goes to sister location to save his sister. He may or may not have saved the spirits in FNAF 3, depending on who you ask. But if he's a good guy, why does he help William, who is obviously not a good guy? Michael in sister location speaks to his father with a tone of obedience. William gave him a list of things to do, and he did it. Michael wasn't concerned with the dangers of the mission. He didn't complain to William about what happened to him, about getting scooped. He just did what he did. He did what he was told. This causes many people to have so many different interpretations of why Michael does what he does. Some people speculate that he does it out of guilt. The FNAF 4 dreams prove he never actually got over killing his brother, and now he's trying to do as much good as he can, freeing as many spirits as he can, because he will never get over what happened at Fredbear's. Some people speculate that William uses the death of the crying child as leverage over Michael, essentially forcing him to do his dirty work, like going to the sister location bunker, and if Michael ever deviates or tries to retaliate, William reminds him of what happened back in 1983, and suddenly, Michael is a willing servant again. I've even seen some theories that suggest Michael is purposely punishing himself as a way to try and make up for what he did, going to Freddy's locations and almost dying at the hands of the animatronics to help relieve some of that constant guilt he feels. All these are valid theories, and they all tell a satisfying story in their own right. But what do I think? Well, I do think Michael is being punished, but not by William, and not by himself. I believe Michael is being punished by the very person he killed all the way back in 1983, the crying child. And I plan on making a follow-up video on this soon, but I believe that Michael is being led on a path of torture by the spirit of the crying child, and that's why all this bad stuff happens to him. It's the crying child's revenge for Michael's constant bullying. One very small detail in FNAF 4 is Foxy's head being ripped off. A lot of people saw it as a reference to Foxy being out of order in FNAF 1, but Foxy's head isn't ripped off in FNAF 1. And the crying child would not have been destructive with the plushie. He clearly valued them a lot. He considered them his friends. The reason the plushie doesn't have a head is because the crying child saw it as Michael, since Michael always wore the Foxy mask. The crying child hurt the Foxy plushie because he really wanted to hurt his older brother. I believe that the crying child's spirit is the one who influences Michael to keep him working nights at Freddy's so he can torment Michael the way Michael tormented him. But this time it's not a practical joke. Michael is in serious danger. He used to make fun of his brother for breaking down and crying at Fredbear's, but now he knows exactly why he was so scared in the first place. All the fear that Michael humiliated his brother over and assumed weren't real had become real, and his brother is making him experience it firsthand. I also believe that the bite victim materializes his spirit as Nightmare Fredbear and continues to haunt Michael in his dreams. My main piece of evidence for this is Ultimate Custom Night's dialogue, where the voice of a child can be heard in the background of Fredbear's voice lines, a trait that none of the other animatronics, the Nightmare ones I mean, have.
Let's see how many times you can be pulled apart.
Beyond that though, I do believe Michael is a willing participant in his father's schemes. Why he chooses to be one is definitely still debatable. You could argue it's guilt again. You could argue that he thinks he's doing the right thing. You could even say he's evil. But the main reason I think that Michael does want to help his father is because he keeps tampering with the animatronics every custom night, and I don't think he would do that if he wasn't trying to do something for William. Though I guess you could theorize that he's tampering with them to try and free the spirits. There's still a lot of questions about Michael. I hope this video addressed some of them at least, and feel free to comment your theories about Michael below. If you liked the video, consider leaving a like, sharing the video, and maybe subscribing. I plan on making more videos on a more consistent basis coming up, and thank you for watching.